Boeing and Airbus both looked into blended wing bodies, but dragged their heels, and neither brought anything to market. Meanwhile, JetZero appeared from nowhere only 5 years ago, and could be poised to overtake them both. 14,500 jobs, $3 billion, a shape that looks like a Manta Ray decided to take to the skies. That is what a scrappy startup in Long Beach, California just put on the table, and they've never delivered a single paying passenger anywhere. Here's a number to stop you scrolling though. Airlines are set to burn through an extra $100 billion in jet fuel this year alone due to price increases. That is not a typo. That is the industry's own numbers, straight from Willie Walsh, the head of global airline body IATA, warning his members in Rio de Janeiro this summer. So when a company says it can cut fuel burn in half, every airline boss on the planet leans forwards. But half is also the exact same promise given by a plane that crashed back in 1948. So which is it this time? A breakthrough? Or a beautiful way to lose a fortune? Let's get stuck in. Every airliner you've ever boarded follows the same rulebook. A cylindrical tube for the cabin, because a circle handles pressure at altitude better than any other shape. Wings swept back so the plane can fly close to the speed of sound without shaking itself apart. Engines hung underneath on pylons, mostly for weight and maintenance access. That rulebook was written in the late 1940s and 1950s, and despite technological advances, the basic form has barely changed since then. And it comes with a brutal catch. Every improvement drags a penalty behind it. Stretch the fuselage for more seats, and you add drag. Add fuel for more range, and you add weight. Shave the fuselage down for better aerodynamics, and you steal cabin space from the paying customers. Airlines and passengers have quietly accepted this trade-off for 80-odd years, because nobody found a way around the geometry. Every generation of engineer has tried to nudge those numbers with better materials, refined wing designs, more efficient engines, and every generation has run into the same ceiling. You can't squeeze much more out of a tube by this point. The fuselage itself, the part every passenger sits inside, contributes very little to actually keeping the aircraft in the air. It's simply dead weight, shaped like a drain pipe, being kept in the sky by the wings either side of it. Until a small team of ex-Boeing, ex-Northrop and ex-Air Force engineers looked at that rulebook and asked a very simple question. What if the fuselage didn't just sit there being dragged through the sky? What if it flew too? That question is not new. It's actually nearly a century old, and it has a body count. Way back in 1947, Jack Northrop flew the YB-49, a jet-powered flying wing bomber, 172 feet across, with no tail and no fuselage at all. It was gorgeous to look at. It was also a nightmare to control. Without a tail, the aircraft had almost no natural stability, and in an era before computers could provide meaningful assistance, that job fell entirely on a human pilot's hands. On the 5th of June 1948, one of the two prototypes broke apart mid-air during a routine stall test at 40,000 feet, killing all 5 men on board. Both outer wing panels simply tore away from the centre section. Among the dead was a young test pilot named Glenn Edwards. The airbase where he died was renamed in his honour. You know it today as Edwards Air Force Base, home to nearly every experimental American aircraft since, including the very demonstrator I'm about to talk about. The flying wing gave America its most famous runway, and then got cancelled less than 2 years later, with every remaining airframe ordered destroyed. Fast forward to the 2000s, and NASA quietly picked the idea back up, spending north of $1 billion over the decades on blended wing research with Boeing. Their X-48 test aircraft, a scaled-down drone roughly the size of a small car, logged over 80 flights and returned significant fuel savings, north of 20% according to some reports. And then it went nowhere. No airline demand. No answer for how you evacuate 200 people from a cabin with no centre aisle in under 90 seconds. The idea kept proving itself in the wind tunnel, but then falling short on the runway. So here's the cliffhanger. What changed between a dead 1940s bomber, a shelved 2000s NASA drone, and a company that just signed up 2 of America's biggest airlines? The challenger is called JetZero, founded as a company in the Long Beach area in 2021 by a small group that includes former Boeing engineers. Their aircraft is called the Z4, and once again, it throws out the tube entirely. Picture the fuselage and the wings melting into one continuous shape, wide, relatively flat, and blended smooth at the edges, so there's no hard line where wing stops and body begins. Every part of that shape is designed to generate lift, not just the wings. Less drag and less dead weight being hauled through the sky. That is the entire pitch in one sentence. Let's look at the numbers as they stand now in 2026. It's expected to have roughly 250 seats, a range of about 5,000 nautical miles, or just over 9,000 kilometers, enough to fly non-stop from London to somewhere like the US West Coast. And a fuel burn JetZero claims could come in at 30 to 50% below a comparable jet flying today. 2 engines sit mounted above the rear of the aircraft rather than slung under the wings, which the company says should also make it noticeably quieter on the ground near airports. Unlike some flashier green aviation projects, there's no hydrogen tank and no giant battery pack hiding in this design. As things stand, it burns ordinary jet fuel, and JetZero's demonstrator uses a Pratt & Whitney PW2040 engine, or a PW2043 in some reports, the same engine family that's associated with the Boeing 757. That is a deliberate choice, nothing exotic to certify on the propulsion side, just an entirely new shape wrapped around it. A final engine supplier decision for the production Z4 is still open, and expected within the next year or so, but the full-scale demonstrator itself is still under construction and has not yet flown. Let's strip away the aerodynamics for a second, because the inside of this aircraft is just as rule-breaking as the outside. Instead of 1 or 2 narrow aisles running the length of a tube, the wide, flat cabin opens up into multiple aisles running side by side, with seat rows stretching across the entire width of the wing, rather than down a corridor. JetZero says every seat will be at least 18 inches wide, and that's wider than most economy seats flying today. Airlines will be offered a no middle seat configuration, and also a 3x2 family seating block for parents travelling with children. Here's the part that sounds almost unbelievable until you read the actual press release. Because the cabin sits deep inside the wing structure, most passengers will not have a traditional window at their shoulder. Instead, JetZero plans a bank of high-definition exterior cameras feeding screens throughout the cabin, giving every passenger a view of the sky regardless of where they're sitting, alongside real window clusters in the front bays for anyone who wants a genuine view. It's either wonderfully clever, or the first thing that gives nervous flyers a reason to panic, and honestly, nobody outside the company has sat in a working cabin yet to say which. To an extent, you could argue Emirates is already doing this in some of their premium cabins for the seats without windows, but it's obviously not to the same extent, as the overall fuselage is still full of windows. Skip the renderings for a moment and look at who's actually signing the checks, because it tells you more than any press release. United Airlines has taken an equity stake and lined up a path to as many as 200 aircraft. Alaska Airlines is in with its own investment and options. Delta is working with JetZero in discussions around cabin and passenger experience ideas. It should be clarified that none of these is a firm order, rather they're conditional pathways, signals of intent. Nonetheless, the interest is clearly there and it's significant. Northrop Grumman's Scaled Composites division, the people who built the famous Spaceship One, are physically constructing the demonstrator out in the Mojave Desert. The United States Air Force put in $235 million to help fund it, because a blended wing shape is just as interesting for cargo, tankers, and military use as it is for passengers. By early 2026, total funding had crossed the $1 billion mark, boosted by a fresh $175 million round led by investment firm B Capital. Then, in July 2026, at the Farnborough Air Show just outside London, JetZero signed a preliminary letter of intent with the US Export-Import Bank to explore up to $3 billion in potential financing support for a new factory in Greensboro, North Carolina, one projected to create up to 14,000 direct manufacturing jobs, with broader supply chain effects expected over time. Gulf Air and Japan Airlines both signed on the same week, JAL referencing the targeted fuel savings of 30 to 50% in its own announcement, and Gulf Air eyeing the early 2030s delivery slots for routes as far as Tokyo or New York. That is serious money from serious operators. But, for all the airshow hype, there's a significant caveat I should point out, which is that not one of these numbers has actually been independently verified by a regulator. Every fuel-saving figure quoted so far is JetZero's own projection, and only JetZero's. A 1:8 scale version called Pathfinder has been quietly flying since receiving FAA airworthiness approval in 2024, gathering data on how this shape actually handles in the air. A full-sized unmanned demonstrator called Jet 1 has a wingspan of around 185 feet and is aiming for its first flight in late 2027. Fuselage assembly is underway right now in 2026, with wing skins being built in a temporary oven constructed specifically around the airframe because it's simply too large to fit any existing curing facilities. But a flying demonstrator is still a long way from being a certified airliner, and this is where the real jeopardy sits right now. Nobody has ever certified a blended wing passenger jet for civil aviation. Regulators still need to solve how you evacuate a cabin that is wide instead of long in 90 seconds. The industry standard rule is that a fully loaded cabin can be fully evacuated in 90 seconds using only half of the emergency exit. They need to prove a non-cylindrical pressure vessel can operate safely at altitude and survive tens of thousands of pressurization cycles without fatigue cracking, in a shape engineers have never mass-produced before. Industry analysts remain openly split on whether it can be done at all on this timeline. One respected aerospace analyst has called the projected fuel savings unproven and suggested the design might suit military use better than passenger flights. Another, a managing director at a well-known aviation consultancy, described the whole project as premature, but not irrational, meaning JetZero has to prove these efficiency numbers in flight before it can chase the billions of dollars needed to turn a demonstrator into a certified airliner people actually board. Meanwhile, Boeing and Airbus are also not exactly standing still. Both have run their own blended wing research for decades, Boeing through that NASA partnership, and Airbus through its own Maverick demonstrator. However, neither has committed to building one for passengers. But both are watching Farnborough deals happen without them, and that has a habit of forcing conservative giants to move faster than they ever intended. JetZero is a real company, with real investment, real airline partners, and a real demonstrator being put together in the Mojave Desert right now. The blended wing shape really can cut drag and burn less fuel. Decades of NASA data back that conclusion. What has never been proven, though, is whether this shape can be built, pressurized, and certified for paying passengers at scale. And every fuel figure attached to it so far comes from the company selling it, not from an independent body. The demonstrator is meant to fly in late 2027. If it does, and if it performs, JetZero could be looking at entry into service somewhere in the early 2030s, aiming eventually for up to 20 aircraft a month. If it doesn't, then this becomes the second time in a century that the flying wing shape proved brilliant in theory, but impossible in practice. Either way, Boeing and Airbus have already lost something this year. Not market share, at least not yet, just the comfortable assumption that nobody was coming for the shape they've built every single airline around since 1948. So tell me, will you be booking a seat on the Manta Ray, or would you prefer someone else be the first passenger? Drop me your thoughts below, and make sure to subscribe, because the moment the demonstrator leaves that runway in Mojave, I'll be right back here breaking down exactly what happened. See you next time.